Good afternoon, folks. It is 2 o'clock here on a Thursday, September 26th. I believe I'm meteorologist Ross Mumal. Latest from the National Hurricane Center. If you were tuning in to First Coast News, you would have heard Chief Meteorologist Tim Deegan kind of break it down in full detail here for you. Still a Category 2 storm, sustained winds of 110 miles per hour, moving to the north-northeast at about 16 miles per hour. But that pressure continues to drop as that eye wall gradually continues to become more and more defined. So typically when you do start to see the eye begin to develop more so on infrared satellite, visible satellite, that generally means you're talking about a major hurricane, a 3, a 4. So we are going to be moving in that direction, but you can see all of the showers and thunderstorms tapering well off to the north. This is really just because we have a cold front pretty much smack dab right up against the hurricane here, draped across much of central and northern Alabama and also into Georgia. So that's really just enhancing all the rain that a lot of those parts of the country and really Appalachia is going to see here over about the next 24 to 36 hours as all that tropical moisture slams right up against the mountains. So here's the latest look at the cone out from the National Hurricane Center. Again, as I had mentioned, still a Category 2 storm, but we are still expecting it to increase into a Category 3 at least. Now, there have been some models showing potentially upwards of a strong 4, if not even a 5. I think the time frame or the window for that has now started to subside a little bit. It was over very, very warm waters just to the northwest of Cuba. It's soon going to be moving into slightly cooler waters. Now, it is still very, very warm here, but really the peak window for it to see that rapid intensification and strengthening is about to pass. So a strong 3, potentially a low-end Category 4. Nonetheless, still a major hurricane expected to make landfall in Appalachia Bay this evening, likely after sunset. We're going to be talking closer to about 9, 10, potentially even 11 p.m. here this evening by the time it makes landfall. Now, some models have also shown perhaps a small eastern wiggle to it. So anyone in the cone of uncertainty could be right where that eye passes over, that center of circulation. So even though you might not be right in line with it, you still could certainly see that eye wall blow through your area and your neighborhoods here. Now, for Jacksonville itself, although we're far away from the eye, we're still going to see plenty of impacts here. We've been trying to warn you about it over the last couple of days, and we've already seen some of those here this evening, these outer bands pushing on through. We've already had multiple tornado warnings across the First Coast, some of which were down just to the north of Daytona Beach, others up near St. Simons Island and Brunswick. No warnings in place right now, but we do have a tornado watch in effect for the entire First Coast until 10 p.m. this evening. So although we do have a slight lull in some of the activity now, we have this one band just about to move out of southeastern Georgia and move into the central part of the state there. So slightly drier air, some subsidence occurring within the storm, going to give us perhaps a several-hour window of really just slightly quieter weather, a little bit of a lull here in the storm itself. Nonetheless, as these new bands begin to make their way onshore and up from the south and southeast, they will carry with them an isolated tornado risk. So as I'd said, Waycross, really the northern end of the Okefenokee, up towards Nichols, Jessup, that's where the worst of it is right now. That lull for the rest of us, though, down in Duval County and Jacksonville, and especially across the southern part of the viewing area. Now, wind gust wise, starting to pick up a little bit. In the morning, if you had waken up and walked outside, maybe didn't really feel all that windy, but we're starting to notice a little bit of an uptick, anywhere from about 25 to 30, even a 35 mile per hour wind gust there at Mayport. So certainly don't let your guard down. These are going to increase more and more throughout the remainder of the afternoon and this evening, particularly after dinner time tonight. Think 6, 7 p.m. right before the storm begins to move onshore. That's when we're going to start seeing wind gusts closer to 40, 50. And then as it does move onshore, 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts across much of the I-95 corridor. Another thing to keep in mind here, especially in Appalachia Bay, where all those waters continuing to push up in, storm surge, anywhere from 15 to 20 feet potentially. So that is life-threatening, catastrophic storm surge for those folks down there in the Gulf Coast. Talking closer to about 10 to 15, a little bit further south down towards Crystal River and Cedar Key. Now here for the First Coast, we're talking much more of about a 1 to 2, potentially 3-foot surge, especially around high tide between about 4 and 6 p.m. this evening. But overall, we are not all that worried or concerned with either the storm surge or freshwater flooding. That's rainfall flooding. Minor street flooding could be possible in some of the heavier downpours, but most of these outer bands of rain are moving in so quickly that it's really not going to allow you all that much time to see a whole bunch of rain. So that is the good news. The flooding threat is relatively low, especially compared to what we saw with Hurricane Debbie back in August, but the wind is still certainly going to be a concern here. This has been in effect for the last 2 days here now. Tropical storm warning for nearly all of our First Coast counties. Columbia, Clinch County, though, you are still in that hurricane warning. So if you're along I-75 and west, you do have that potential to at least feel hurricane force winds. So what does that mean? Category 1, those winds anywhere from 70 to upwards of 90, even 95 miles per hour. That generally leads to minor roof damage. You're going to see a lot of broken limbs, some trees down, and certainly prepare yourself for extensive power outages. So hopefully you folks out further westward, out towards 75, Lake City, and especially over towards Perry and Tallahassee, that you've done all of the preparations that you need. You have everything charged and you're ready to get hunkered down here before the evening. Now, for those of us in Duval and Jacksonville and really that I-95 corridor, so in more coastal areas here, we're going to be talking more so for the 40 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts, and 60 miles per hour generally signify when those winds become severe and start doing damage. So that's when you'll start to see some of those broken tree limbs and some isolated power outages here or there. So although not everyone is going to lose power tonight, perhaps in Jacksonville, we certainly could see some pockets where we get some isolated wind gusts of 55 to 60 miles per hour. And really, just the overall wind field in this thing is ginormous. Could be 350 to 400 miles wide from the core of where those tropical storm force winds are going to be felt. So if you're in the yellow, you're going to experience at least 40 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts. Now, those hurricane force winds, that's going to be in the orange circle and then the red circle. That's where the most damaging winds are going to be seen. So for folks in Perry and Tallahassee, you will experience those. Now, anyone either in Gainesville or Lake City, you're going to be right on the very edge of that. So much more likely to see about 60 to 75 mile per hour wind gusts in those areas. So right on the edge potentially where we could see those hurricane force winds. But because the storm is moving so quickly northward, especially as it continues to grow and really the hours just pass on and on here, it's going to carry those hurricane force winds well up into southwestern Georgia and even eventually up towards Atlanta by very, very early tomorrow morning. So parts of central and northern Georgia, very heavily forested and wooded. So I would expect a lot of downed trees up there and certainly a significant amount of power outages across Atlanta and northern Georgia tomorrow. Here's a quick look at kind of what we can expect with regards to the wind gusts over the next 6 to 12 hours by 8 to 9 p.m. So I had said after sunset tonight, as a storm begins to move on shore over in Appalachia Bay, that's when our wind gusts are really going to start to crank up. So 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts, especially along the coast where those winds are feeding in off the ocean. And then there are some of those very strong ones as the core and potentially that eye move on shore off to the west of I-75. So this is just what one model is trying to depict. This isn't going to show you exactly how strong the wind's going to be at this exact moment, but just to give you a good idea, the worst of it is likely going to be between about, I'd say, 6 p.m. and 2 a.m. for the vast majority of us, at least right along the I-10 corridor. Now, good news is by tomorrow morning, this thing is well off to the north, up towards Atlanta. So by tomorrow afternoon, we actually might even see a little bit of some sun, a few scattered showers, but the winds will certainly not only change direction, but taper off quite a bit as well. So let's break it down here for you, county by county. We're going to head further west here first for Columbia, Baker, Union, Bradford County. Worst of it between 6 and 12 a.m. Again, we are anticipating landfall after 8 o'clock, likely much closer to about 10 p.m. for you folks. Gusts upwards of 80 to if not 90 miles per hour, which will certainly cause flying debris. So make sure you just have everything prepared. You're in your safe spot and you are ready to go for the storm to make landfall here later on. And of course, isolated tornado risk will continue as we get ready for the main core of the storm to eventually push on shore here over about the next 6 to 12 hours. Now, up further north into southeast Georgia, Ware, Charlton, Brantley, Pierce counties, it's going to be a little bit later in the evening, likely 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. And although the winds won't be as bad because it's gradually beginning to weaken as the storm moves on shore, you still certainly could see wind gusts upwards of about 75 miles per hour overnight tonight and into early tomorrow morning. Now, coastal southeast Georgia, that's going to be Glenn, Camden, Nassau counties. 1 to 3, even potentially 4-foot storm surge seen anywhere from about Fernandina Beach up to Brunswick. Gusts 50 to 60 miles per hour. Very similar story with regards to what we're going to experience in Duval County and across the southern extent of the First Coast. That includes St. Johns, Clay, Putnam, Flagler counties, even gusts upwards of 60, and we will continue to unfortunately still see that isolated tornado risk through the remainder of this evening as those bands move in from the south and southeast. Water spouts will certainly be a concern, and if they move onshore, although they may be brief, certainly will still have a threat of tornadoes here throughout the remainder of this evening. So one last look at what Category 2 Hurricane Helene currently looks like. We're going to have much more for you on First Coast News this evening and on First Coast News Plus. But until then, I'm meteorologist Ross Mumal, First Coast News on your side.
This has been a First Coast News on your side special report tracking Helene.